Hey everybody, welcome back to Moonmen TCG. Today we're going to be talking about 5 things that you can do to improve your skills as a Luffy player. Let's dive right into it. A lot of people talk about how bad Luffy is, both in raw starter deck form and in set 1. And I'm also one of those people. I've been downplaying Luffy for a while and encouraging people to steer away from him if they wish to play more properly. But I think that there are a few things that we've been doing less than favorably as Luffy players that could up our game. Now, I still would like to say that I think Luffy is so far the weakest of the 4 starter decks at least, but given our new information, I definitely think that he is better than we've been giving him credit for. So let's talk about tip number 1. The first tip may seem obvious to you veteran Luffy players, but I still see a lot of people struggling with it, and that is sequencing your attacks in a proper order. Knowing in what order you should be attacking, using your leader effect, and playing your cards to have the most optimal outcome with the least risk can be really tricky, especially for newer players. It is definitely an acquired skill, not one you have naturally. To give you the best demonstration possible, I'm going to show you a few clips from my recent streams that will help you understand the different ways that you can and should be ordering your turn. So you can see this clip starts off with my opponent just beginning their second turn. They played a Vivi on their first. And the very first thing they do with this turn is play their Zoro. This is very overzealous. They have the option to wait to play the Zoro. They then immediately follow it up with a Chopper. Take a moment to clean up their board. They then use their Vivi to attack my Sanji. Now, everything up until this point may seem okay, but they've actually already made an extremely critical mistake. The next thing that they are going to do is they are going to use their leader effect to attach a Dawn to the leader so that it is 6k instead of 5k, making it harder to block. This makes it more likely that they will hit me for 1 damage. Perfectly reasonable thing to do in an aggro deck. But you will see, and I talked about this on my stream, once I reveal the life that I had to take, it's a Gum Gum Jet Pistol. Now, since they chose to play the Zoro before attacking, I now have a far better target, and this shifts the entire tempo of the game into my favor. Whereas before, they probably would have had a strong presence by just playing the Chopper and not the Zoro, and using the Dawn from the Chopper rest to attack the leader. However, even if they did not have the Chopper, it still would have been smarter to simply ignore the Luffy leader effect than it would have been to play a Zoro and use one of the rested Dawn because of this risk. It's not worth the added benefit of the 1 Dawn just so that I need to combo 1 more card from my hand if I so choose to make it so that you are set back very far. Now, we've all been in that situation before. It is by no means surprising that someone would make that mistake. I certainly have many times on stream before, as a matter of fact. But it's important to always be thinking about, is it worth the risk of me playing this card when a trigger effect could destroy it, just so I can pump up my Luffy effect? Also, you need to be thinking about what triggers your opponent may have. If you're playing against Kaido, you can safely play a Frankie, because their only trigger that destroys cards would be a Who's Who, which can only target cards that cost 3 or less. Therefore, your Frankie is safe. These are things you need to be considering from matchup to matchup, and it makes your sequencing much more intricate. So keep it in mind moving forward. And with that, we are going to dive into tip number 2, which is to protect your character cards. In an aggro deck, it can be really easy to lose sight of when you actually want to be defensive, but for the tempo of the One Piece trading card game, there are actually key character cards you're going to often want to protect, and honestly, it is very frequently worth even protecting not that strong character cards just because you need the extra bodies on board. The addition of Summoning Sickness to this game makes it so that it's kind of worth it to ensure that you always have attackers every turn, especially when those attackers have additional effects such as Jinbei or Zoro. Let me show you a clip where I protected a Jinbei through all odds using most of my resources, but the payoff was really big. So in this situation, you can see I have arrested Jinbei, and the very first thing my opponent does is attack it with his leader. I do have a blocker, but I decide to hold my blocker because he does have an additional attacker, and I use my Frankie in hand to protect the Jinbei for a turn. After some deliberation, my opponent decides to bump up that Karoo so that it's a sizable attacker, and he swings it into my Jinbei at 5k. At this point, I've already committed a Frankie to the Jinbei. I'd rather not let it go to waste. I commit a second Frankie, keeping the Jinbei alive for another turn so that I can get those essential stats on the board. After that, however, my opponent ends up playing a Sanji, and using both the Luffy leader effect and Nami's effect, as you'll see in a sec here, to attach 2 Dawn to it, giving it rush. It is now 6k. And then even further beyond, after a little bit of deliberation, they decide to use one of their active Dawn to bring Sanji even higher to try and get over my Jinbei. He's now 7k. 7k is a lot to deal with for a 5k. Now, I could block here, but I actually end up deciding to use my guard point because the guard point gets me to perfectly 8k, so it's a golden opportunity to use guard point. It makes more mathematical sense to use guard point in this turn because I will be unlikely to get a time again where its counter is perfect, as well as I have 1 Dawn up, so it allows me to use my Dawn now and not need to worry about holding one for the future turns. Now let's take a look at the crackback that I'm able to deliver because I was protecting that Jinbei. I'm lucky enough to top deck a Nami to help with my sequencing a little and help me in the future turns, so I'll use that Nami effect to throw onto Jinbei, but it is worth noting that it was not required as I could have just put the active Dawn onto the Jinbei. It just feels a little nice. I swing the Jinbei into his Karoo. I'm now trying to clear his board in the way that he could not clear mine. I use the ability to pump my leader by 1000, making him a 6k, and my opponent plays a similar way to me, committing a lot to this Karoo, using a guard point and a plus 1000 counter in the form of another Karoo to defend him. He really wants to keep some board presence so that he can try and get rid of my stuff next turn. However, I then decide to use the 6k attack from my leader to finish off the Karoo, and he is unable to stop me this time, as preventing 2 6k swings onto a 3k body is definitely a tall order. As you can see, I then play my Sanji. I'm using this to clear his last Sanji on board. Normally I would save my rush card and just use the jet pistol, but I decided I want the extra body on board so that he can swing next turn. In hindsight, using the jet pistol probably would have been slightly smarter, but I commit all of my Dawn to the Sanji, basically ensuring that I will have a full board to his nothing, and I still have that chopper that I never used to protect my Jinbei in the following turns once more. Now, I ended up winning that game, and it's mostly out of my ability to protect the cards already on my board, as opposed to just let my opponent clear me every turn. If I hadn't have overcommitted in that initial turn to the Jinbei, yes, I could have played the Frankies, yes, I'd have had the guard point later, but I wouldn't have been able to get the same swings in on the following turn that led me to that victory. I think after my slight misplay last clip, now is a perfect time to go over holding your rush cards. Look, I get it. We've all been there. You're playing red. You're playing the Straw Hats. You're very excited and you want to damage your opponent and beat them into the ground. But using your rush cards too early has led many a Luffy player to an early grave. I'm going to show you a clip where I choose not to use my rush cards early, and saving those rush cards actually wins me the game later. Now what you're looking at here is I have just attacked with my Vivi by attaching an active Dawn to her, and then I swung with my leader at my opponent, who then proceeded to combo out with X-Drake. Now here, I choose to play the Jinbei, even though I could play one of my Sanjis and give him rush with leader effect. Then later, towards the end of the game, You can see I've held on to these two Sanjis the whole game, always opting for slower cards until the bitter end. And then in this turn, I'm finally ready to go for my kill. It's the very end of the game. So I use my leader to attack my opponent to get the ball rolling. He combos out, but at the end of the day, both Sanjis with Rush just proved to be too much for him, and he can't counter out of all of my attacks. Saving those Rush cards won me this game. As you can see, knowing when to use your Rush cards can be a really tricky thing. But if that's something you think you might need help with, I have just the resource for you that could really put your One Piece knowledge over the edge. The Moonmen has recently started up a Patreon. On here you can find articles about more nuanced playmaking decisions, including one about when to use your Rush cards. The rule of Rush: when should you be using your cards with Rush? It has a set of articles called the Poneglyphs as well, which are living documents that rank every card revealed out of 10, as well as give detailed reasoning behind their rankings. I update them not only by adding new cards, but by updating old card entries as new combos emerge, so you can always see how good a card is, no matter how old it is. It has 3 tiers, so you can find a package that works well with you. The highest tier giving you access to one-on-one coaching with me, so we can improve your gameplay even further. The first article here is free, so you can check it out, no cost to you, and see if you like what you see. And if you do, consider joining. It would really help out our channel a lot. Well, now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can move on to our next tip. Make sure you're using your Nami effect before your Luffy effect. So this feels so obvious that I probably shouldn't even need to say it, but I'm going to anyway. So you can see in this clip I play my chopper and then I use Nami to attach the Dawn as opposed to Luffy. This may seem nitpicky or unnecessary, but if my Zoro in that clip had swung and hit something like a jet pistol or a who's who that had then blown up my Nami, I'd have lost access to that effect for the turn. You're giving your opponent a more prime target. It doesn't come up very frequently, but when it does, it can be devastating, especially if you need all of your Dawn attach effects to make a Sanji have Rush, for example, or a Luffy be able to avoid blockers. You don't want the 1 in 100 chance to come up negatively impacting you, when it makes no difference to just remember to sequence the orders more correctly. And that brings us to our final tip. Sometimes it's okay to attack your opponent's character cards instead of just their leader. I have definitely seen a lot of new Luffy players put all of their resources into attacking your opponent's leader. You need to dedicate some to clearing their board, or else whatever they have on board will clear yours. Keeping your characters alive really can separate the good and bad Luffy players, and this is just one more step in that process. So as you can see here, I could attack my opponent's leader, but I actually choose to go after their who's who instead, because if I don't, there's a decent chance that they can beat me outright next turn. And then I put my faith in the fact that I have a lot of attackers on the following turn, so maybe I'll be able to win next turn. If I had just been blindly swinging at leader, my opponent assuredly would have been able to beat me on that turn. This gave me a fighting chance to try and make a few comeback plays before I could fizzle out into nothing. As always, thank you guys for watching. Those were all 5 of the tips. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for daily One Piece updates, and I'll see you next time.